Mini episode 22 of the FDH Lounge is brought to you by DOU Productions, delivering coverage of sports and pop culture through columns, live blogs, and original videos. Follow them on the web at generationchatter.blogspot.com.
A long time ago, on a gloomy, wet Cleveland spring night, two men stand alone amidst late-night drivel. Their voices echo across the vacant station parking lot as they debate the merits of the great American radio show that have been missing for far too long. On that night, an idea was born. That idea became the FDH Lounge. Welcome to the FDH Lounge.
Welcome to mini episode number 22 of the FDH Lounge. This is FDH managing partner Rick Morris coming at you. I want to thank once again our good friends at Sportsology, including and especially good pal Russ Cohen, for making their channel available to us from time to time here when we need it to speak with guests, and that is certainly going to be the case today. A fascinating beat, sports business and sports on television, and for him to be covering that intersection. And again, just really enjoy talking to him. Glad to be able to get to do it again. Michael McCarthy from USA Today. Michael, good to have you on tonight. How are you, sir?
I'm great. How are you? It's great to be back on.
Fine, thanks. It's a pleasure to have you on, Michael. And with the baseball going on right now at the moment, the American League Championship Series, I guess we can start there. It's an issue, and I teased it before I brought you on. We've got market size of the teams involved. I mean, I guess it could be smaller in some instances. These aren't the smallest markets in Major League Baseball, but it's definitely a step down from what baseball's been used to in recent years. You do have the St. Louis Cardinals that had a quasi-regional following, especially back a couple of decades ago when they were the furthest west team in Major League Baseball, and there's roots of that remain. And the Metroplex, I guess, is a decent-sized market, but what's MLB digging in for here without the Red Sox, Yankees, and Phillies in the League Championship Series or World Series this year?
Well, I think there's a lot of worry, particularly amongst the TV network executives. We're coming off a season here, Rick, in which we had the lowest World Series rating ever. And, here are the Yankees, probably the top drawing team TV-wise in the American League, out. Here's the Phillies, probably the top drawing TV team in the National League, out. And then you get out, and then the Red Sox are out. So it's going to be very, very tough for them to overcome that kind of disadvantage. On the other hand, you're seeing some great games. The playoffs so far has been great TV. These are well-played, tight, close games. And, you got some real interesting teams and some young stars. So maybe it'll even out.
Well, that leads me to a good question. I mean, maybe this is the naive, hopeful purist in me, but it would seem like it might be a good way for them to go, especially looking forward, marketing the game itself, some of the young stars that are even sort of dispersed beyond the big markets, and it might be the pragmatic thing to do as well, Michael, when you look at it. I mean, the Phillies, sure, they've got a great window for at least the next 2 years or so, but the Yankees, the Red Sox, there's already a lot of bloat, already a lot of inefficient money there, and it's only going to get worse, like say for the Yankees, when A-Rod gets further into his deal. So is that something that MLB is even starting to think about right now, when you've got guys like Tulowitzki and Carlos Gonzalez and Ryan Braun that are locked into the markets that they're in? Maybe try to get ahead of this thing and market those guys where they're at and market the game itself rather than the biggest teams?
I'd say MLB is definitely thinking about it. MLB has so many great stories, so many great young players, so much happening in so many different markets. But all a lot of networks like ESPN want to do is focus on Yankees and Red Sox. And I think that's frustrating for a lot of baseball viewers around the country. On the other hand, as we saw last year, that for all these people who've been saying year after year, Rick, give me two small market teams in the World Series and I'll tune in. Well, you know what? They didn't. You had the Giants and you had the Rangers and you had two small market teams.
There are several more that didn't, aren't there?
So it hurts. It hurts to have those teams not in action from a TV standpoint.
I can imagine that, yeah. I mean, as much as I'm a Midwest guy that kind of rails against that kind of mentality. I understand that that's what drives the truck at the end of the day here. But looking as we continue to go along here, I mean, I was joking about this on Twitter the other day, but the Red Sox, who have become Yankees Junior in order to succeed over the last decade, they're looking like they might turn into the 1980s Yankees. I mean, without Epstein and without Francona, there's no guarantee that they're not just going to be a big money team that throws money around and not necessarily efficiently. Actually, we've seen that from the Cubs, where Theo Epstein is headed. So is that anything that's causing any kind of disquiet in Major League Baseball? This has been one of the anchor franchises over the last decade here, and they're just imploding by the minute.
It's certainly worrisome. And I speak to a lot of baseball fans and a lot of Red Sox fans, and some of the Red Sox fans I talked to are disgusted with what's going on. For years you had the Red Sox having this sort of underdog image. They were the little engine that could. Up against the evil empire of the Yankees and Steinbrenner, which would spend, gazillion dollars. But guess what? The Red Sox spend more money than anybody else. They just spend, less than the Yankees. So I think, money-wise, they've become the Yankees. They got a lot of bad contracts. They got a lot of guys who are under contract for years that they can't possibly trade, like a John Lackey. And at the same time, the clubhouse culture is becoming like the Bronx Zoo of the 1970s. When Big Pappy stands up today and says, I might want to play for the Yankees, that's saying something.
As soon as we hear the equivalent of Sparky Lyle sitting on a birthday cake, we'll know that they've really reached that point, won't we, Michael?
That's right. Yeah, went from Cy Young to Sayonara. That was the saying about Sparky Lyle.
Yes, it was. That's those teams were, but at least those late 70s Yankees teams won, which the Red Sox of the last 4 years can't lay any claim to. Probably the biggest sports business story at the moment, I'm sure one that's taking up a ton of your time, is this NBA lockout business. David Stern today with the whole no-duh thing that the Christmas games might be in some doubt here at this point. I never believed, even if they got things settled on Monday, that they'd be good to go a mere 2 weeks later anyway. So what do you think the best case scenario is? I mean, the parties are still far apart here, but this whole thing that we could be up and going in 2 weeks strikes me as ludicrous when you look at the free agency and everything else that's got to be sorted out.
Right. I mean, best case scenario is you're looking at a strike or lockout shortened season, similar to what happened 10 years ago. Worst case scenario is they lose the whole season, which would be, a huge setback for the league and for the players and for the fans. I mean, the NBA was hot last year. Everybody was following the NBA. I mean, I know as a reporter, so many of our readers are so interested in LeBron James and the Heat and all the trades and all the players, superstar players moving from one city to another. And, they're going to lose all that buzz and all that fan excitement if this goes away. I mean, one of the things that's funny about this, and I speak to a lot of sports business people, and they told me months ago that they thought the NBA was more likely to lose a season than the NFL. And that's what's happening now. And the reason was because in the NFL, there's no real owners who are losing money. They just wanted to make more money. And they wanted to take it out of the players' pockets. In the NBA, you do have owners who are losing money. So, we might be facing an NHL situation here where they basically, just lose a season to rewrite the business model.
Well, it's really interesting, Michael, because you referenced how hot they were, and yet I can't help but wonder if the seeds weren't sown of the seeds of destruction, that is, at that high point, because you had everybody in America tuning in to see the Miami Heat get theirs, and that was what made a lot of this so hot and really kind of inflated the balloon. But I remember, and this might just be the bitter Cavs fan in me, but I remember saying at the time, I think this whole thing makes a lockout more likely, because I think every owner not named Mickey Arison is looking at Dan Gilbert and saying, there but for the grace of God go I. I mean, the owners seem like they want to get some control back in the league from the players, and again, if you're just sitting there where a guy can up and leave after 5 or 6 years and you have no recourse, in the case of LeBron it was 7, but you have no recourse, that to me seemed to put the fear of God into a lot of owners thinking about the possibility of that happening to them.
Yeah, that's a very good point. There's two ways to look at that. One is this, is the players are, this is capitalism. This is a free country. They can go work wherever they want. On the other hand, the players who did move were pretty explicit that they felt that this was a sea change, that, that they were finally taking control of their own destiny, and what was wrong with players, banding together to play in a city where they all wanted to join together. And, and if the owners didn't like it, and if Commissioner Stern didn't like it, then tough. Well, obviously they didn't like it.
Yeah, maybe they should have thought that through a little better, Michael. It seems a little well-considered considering where we're at right now, but what's your sense of how far apart they are? We're hearing different things. It's only the mid-level exemption. It's this, it's that, but even that appears to be quite an issue. And as far as whether it's how the soft cap, I guess the owners have moved up a hard cap, but how that's going to be implemented exactly. This whole notion of whether it's going to be 50-50. The owners seem to think like they're giving blood by getting up to 50-50, and the players regard it as unacceptable. There's nothing that I hear publicly that makes me think they're even close to reaching a deal, and yet you keep hearing about these flurries of negotiations. So how much more is going on behind closed doors than what we're hearing, do you think?
Well, I think it's very similar to the NFL. You've got this flurry of negotiations beyond closed doors, but I don't think they're that close. I mean, from what I hear, they're still pretty far apart. And, basically what this comes down to, the same as the NFL, is revenue. What is the revenue split? The owners, feel that they've given the players too much revenue over the years. Now the players naturally think that the revenue split is just great because they're getting the majority of the revenue. So, I think all those other things that you're talking about are side issues, and they're important, but the big thing is the revenue split. And if they can't close the gap on that, then they're in trouble.
Yeah, they're going to be doomed if that ends up sticking around as an issue. Well, you referenced before about the precedent that we've seen in big-time sports over the last decade when the NHL lost an entire season to a lockout. I'm wondering how that affects the picture here, kind of even indirectly, as we start to look at TV a little bit. The timing on this strikes me as being very curious and potentially beneficial for NBC Comcast, because you have them with this new hockey deal that they started at the end of last year. You've reported on the turnover from Versus to the NBC Sports Network on January 2nd. They're going to be ramping that up. They got the Olympics coming next summer. It sure seems like occupying a bigger spot on the landscape right now with no basketball is working out perfect for NBC.
Hockey seems to be having the last laugh here. They don't have any labor problems. They got a new TV deal. They got, the NBA self-destructing, at least temporarily. Who would have thought this, a few years ago back when hockey was considered on the outs? I mean, a lot of sports fans and, people in the media business, too, are not hockey fans. They don't really consider it a major sport. But right now they're looking pretty good. They got exciting players. They've got their labor peace. They got a TV deal. They got a network behind them. What hockey has to get, a hold of, like every league, is how do you protect its stars? How do you protect a guy like Sidney Crosby? He got a concussion on their biggest TV event of the day, which is the Winter Classic. Some guy skated by and, either accidentally or on purpose hit him in the head. Guy was out for half the season. How do you protect those guys? How do you keep your stars on the ice? That's the big issue for hockey.
Is it a matter of now where you have Brendan Shanahan in there administering justice? You've got him and just as a side note, as a Wings fan, he was always one of my big favorites. So maybe I'm a little biased, but I see him as a guy that I think everybody can respect and everybody can see where he's coming from here. You've got a guy who's been in the trenches, who's absorbed the physical pain, and if he's saying, "Hey, look, enough with the head hits and everything like that," it is kind of a sea change in the world of hockey, taking that part of the physicality out of it. I would have to think if a guy like Shanahan, a bruising power forward like him, is saying there can still be accountability in the game without hits to the head, that's got to go a long way, I would think, in cleaning it up, Michael.
I think, you know what I mean, he has a tremendous amount of respect. I've been in press conferences. I've been in meetings with Shanny. Everybody loves the guy because they know he's been there. You know, he was a great scorer and he was a great player, but he was also willing to drop the gloves and do what was necessary to protect his teammates. I'll never forget, he was maybe his last year in the league. He was playing for the Rangers. And Donald Brashear was taking liberties with the Rangers' smaller players at Madison Square Garden. You know, Shanny took off his helmet, challenged him right at center ice. You know, that's the kind of guy he is. That's the kind of guts he has. So I agree with you. You know, when a guy like that tells you, you know, we have to change the game, we have to avoid these hits to the head, or, you know, we're going to lose the game that they love, I think they're going to take it very seriously. You know, even the agitators of the sport, like Matt Cook, are going to take it seriously.
That does take a lot of guts going after Brashear. That's not Yuri Hudler you're going after there.
He took off his helmet before he did it.
Well, that shows you mean business, no question about it. But as far as the outlet the NHL is getting carried on here, of course, Versus/NBC Sports channel, and of course NBC as well for this. How do you think it's going to be playing out here with the expanded coverage on cable and really with the rebranding of the network as a whole? Is that going to be something that's going to drive it to a lot more homes than Versus has ever been able to achieve, and Outdoor Life Network before that?
Definitely. You know, one of the underreported sports media stories of the last couple of years is the comeback of the NHL. The NHL is hot again. You know, ratings are growing, audience are growing, sponsors are growing. You know what I mean? The sport has got a lot of buzz. You know, now you take away the NBA, and, you know, it certainly gives them some open field running room to make a big splash this fall.
Is it going to give it any kind of leverage as far as when the channel makes its transition on January 2nd here? Again, we you know, there are those of us that can speak blithely of making a run at ESPN as though that were nothing. Of course, that's a long-term project, but where do you feel they're essentially at on that scale? Do you think they're maybe a couple of years away from giving them a good run?
I think, you know, they're a long way from giving ESPN a good run. Okay. I don't even know if long-term that's the plan. But, you know, what you can do when you're dealing with a giant like ESPN, which has become you know, almost all-powerful in sports media, is you can carve out some niches. And I think that's what they're going to do. I also think, you know, rebranding at NBC is a great idea. You know, NBC Sports has a long sports history. People connect NBC with sports because of football and the Super Bowls and the Olympics and all this stuff they did over the years. And look, I talked to a lot of hockey fans who still didn't really get Versus, what it is, what it does. You know, as hard as the network tried, it was like rolling a rock up a hill. So I think it was a smart move to go with the NBC name.
Yeah. I mean, as long as they're all under the same corporate family right now, yeah. I mean, that seems an obvious thing here. Something else that I've seen you writing about over the course of the last couple of weeks here, this deal with the Longhorn Network, it really, in one way or another, almost seems to have its fingerprints on everything that we're seeing with this conference shuffle right now in college football and I guess college basketball as well as the teams realign. It'll have some carryover there, but it's football that's driving it, and it seems to be Texas envy that's driving it in a lot of ways. So more developments. I think I saw something today about Boise possibly having some talks with the Big East. Where do things stand right now? I know the sands seem to be shifting under our feet almost by the hour, but what's your sense of where things are headed and how many more big shoes might drop by the end of the year?
I think there's a lot of shoes left to drop. You know, every action has consequences. Every action has a reaction. And, you know, the Longhorn Network, given the University of Texas its own network, you know, is like throwing a rock into a pond. The ripples are just spreading all over the place. Everybody's reacting to it. Either they want a deal like Texas has got, which is great, or they're saying, I don't want to be with Texas because I can't compete with them, especially if they get the chance to air high school games as a recruiting tactic. So, yeah, I think there's a lot more to come in this. You know, I think, you know, it's a great deal for Texas, and it's a great deal for ESPN. However, the people around them who compete with them don't think it's such a great deal. And I don't think the issue is going to go away.
And I agree with the point that you made in the point-counterpoint column here, or I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you seem to be making the point that it's a little bit of a conflict of interest for ESPN with their place in all of this. They're covering stories, they're covering all that's just going on, and yet they're enveloped in it. Their actions in setting up the Longhorn Network, it's really driving a lot of the chaos that's enveloped college sports right now.
Yeah, that's a problem for TV networks. Are they business partners? Are they journalism organizations? Are they sponsors? I mean, you take ESPN, the Longhorn Network. Well, ESPN says, it's going to cover it objectively and fairly, and, there's going to be a separation of church and state and all that. And I believe them. But, this is business, and business is business, and areas get murky. There are a lot of gray areas, which, even if nothing is going on, it gives people the opportunity to say that there might. Even Pat Forty of ESPN worried about it, and he's one of their top college basketball on-air reporters. He said, I don't know if this is such a great deal. What are people going to think about ESPN getting into business with a single university? So, it remains to be seen, and I agree with you. In that open mics, I did lay out some of the reasons why I thought this was a bad idea for college football. But, up till now, nothing has gone wrong with the deal, and ESPN's a great journalism organization. I expect them to do their best to cover it.
I heard about what Forty said. I didn't hear it directly, but it was told to me by one of our show contributors. And I got to say, my first response is, I forget the woman's name, but the one that was the ombudsman before Don Ohlmeyer. My first thought was that Pat Forty better hire the food taster that she had, because they're going to be coming for him. Now, all you got to do is look at what happened to Bruce Feldman to see what kind of guts that takes out of Pat Forty. That was a brave move there, Michael, speaking truth to power on his part. The other thing about this, too, the pendulum seems to be swinging both ways here. You keep hearing, we're on our way, 4 16-team power conferences, and now it looks like it's swinging away from that, as it looks like the Big 12 might not have a vivisection done on it, but, we may be back talking about the 4 16-team super conferences by this time next week, but do you have any kind of a sense yet of where it's going to shake out on if that's the destination, or is that the kind of thing where it's just going to go back and forth until we finally know?
Well, there's an old saying from all the president's men, follow the money. I think it's all about cash at this point. I think, everybody's talking a good game about traditions and rivalries and the good of the, what's good for the student athletes, but everybody's following the money at this point, and if the money leads to, some super conferences, I think that's where we'll end up.
In the end, isn't it really, probably not startling for you, but because you see the stuff up close, but I'll bet for a lot of people you talk to and when you interact with readers and anybody else, I got to believe it's startling for a lot of people just to see what a second fiddle college hoops is in all of this. We keep hearing every year about how much money March Madness makes and all of that, but all you got to do is look at how Kansas almost ended up a homeless waif when all this stuff was starting to go down here. I'm not saying there's no money in college sports, but it's really been shocking to me in all of this how much it's clearly dwarfed by big-time football.
You're absolutely right about that. And college basketball is such a great sport, and we all love March Madness, and we all love watching it, come spring. But this all boils down to money. If you're dealing with athletic departments, by far the most money is generated by college football. That's why college football coaches make 2 or 3 times what college basketball coaches make. That's why athletic directors and people who oversee college football programs get so much money, because they are the cash cow. And, who pays the piper, plays the tune. And the tune that is being played on college campuses is totally driven, I think, by college football.
Yeah, it definitely really seems to be, and when you look at the networks that are they're getting set up here, the Pac-12 is about to set up its own conference. It was kind of curious to me when they were talking about bringing Texas in. I understand Texas would have shared the income from theirs had they gone along with the deal, and that ended up being the deal breaker when they wouldn't. But one wonders how a Longhorn network and a Pac-12 channel would have coexisted side by side.
Right, and when you look at the Longhorn Network and Texas and ESPN, obviously it's driven by money and trying to make a profit and trying to make something great and, big that people want to buy. But, it's not like the other conferences and their network deals are doing anything different. They're all trying to get TV deals. They'd love to get a deal like Texas. The only difference is, they just wish they had what Texas has.
Yeah, and I guess who could blame the teams for casting some jealous eyes in that way? Everybody would like to be where they're at, and whenever Texas says that, there is a ring of truth to it, no question about it. But
right, can you imagine Texas gets the opportunity to air high school football games?
Last I heard, they're backing off of that, but or are they? Are they backing off of that, or is that still a negotiating chip?
No, they backed off on it, but that was in the original idea. And, who's to say that, once this channel gets up and running, that they don't revisit it? No good ideas go unused in the TV business.
Yeah.
And, if that was the original idea, you got to think that the people behind the network, see that as a possibility eventually down the road.
Well, that's the way that these things go, Michael. It's like a vampire. Until you put a stake in the heart, these things could rise to live another day. Michael, it was a pleasure to get you on in our allotted time here tonight. We really enjoyed having you on in February. It's always fun talking about these things with you. Thank you so much for a great conversation. I hope to do it again here soon.
Hey, my pleasure, Rick. Anytime.
Oh, thank you so much, Michael. All right, the great Michael McCarthy, everybody, from USA Today, and it's a pleasure to have had him on here with us. I want to thank the FDH New York Bureau, Steve Cervillo, for having gotten this set up here tonight. This has been FDH Lounge, mini episode number 22. We'll be coming back at you again in the next couple of days again here with our fantasy football update for the weekend. Thank you. Good night.